I have a few house rules. I like to keep them very light, but they are still rules indeed. I want to invite you to have a conversation today. Don't be a stranger in the chat. We're going to be interactive. There's going to be plenty of time for Q&A. And I want you to take what you need and leave the rest. And what I mean by this is we are recording. So I want you to, don't be afraid that you have to kind of scribble everything down from the session. Take exactly what feels good for you right now. Share what you feel comfortable sharing. In the chat, I'd love for you to pose your questions and set it to everyone. But if you have a question that you would like me to answer or support you with anonymously, you can write it directly to me and I'll get you an answer and we'll work with you today, regardless of how comfortable or uncomfortable you feel kind of sharing it. And then the last thing is don't be a stranger. My name is Jaz Broughton. If you Google me, you can Google me at Jaz Broughton or justjaz.co. And I'm a career coach. The time that we spend today is exactly how I love spending my time. I'm an ambitious woman. That is both in terms of the ambition, but also my pronouns. I identify by she, her. I am a certified life coach and I work with folks applying life coaching to career goals. And that's what I'm going to be doing today. So please don't be alarmed if you ask a question in the Q&A and I ask you a question in return, right? I'm always a coach, so I want to give that caveat straight off the bat. I'm proudly multi-passionate. As you can see, I'm a career coach, but I'm also a community manager in tech. And I've been working in tech for probably coming up to 5 years now. And I'm proudly so. I'm also a little bit obsessed with career growth, right? And you'll see it through workshops like this. I have a podcast, a community of ambitious folks growing their careers, and many other routes and avenues where I'm able to support people in their career growth. And last but definitely not least, I'm a lover of R&B, tea and cheese separately. The R&B can go with any of those, but I don't think I've ever had cheese and tea together in the same sitting. But that's just a little fun fact about me. So why should we care? Why should we unlock our careers? Because as I said before, career growth looks different to each of us, and it's very, very easy for us to just show up and sort of phone it in, check in and check out, right? Clock in and clock out. When I say that phrase, it kind of reminds me of like Fred Flintstone getting his his stone card checked as he goes into work. That's what comes into mind for me. I have no clue what was happening during the day. Not sure if Fred Flintstone enjoyed his job, but he was checking in, checking out, and going through the motions. And it's really, really important for us to understand that career growth usually represents something more than just the thing, right? The promotion represents more than just the promotion. The pay rise represents more than just the pay rise. The career pivot represents more than that. We aren't one-dimensional beings, and it's important that we recognize the importance of the impact that our careers can have on our lives as a whole. The feeling of being more confident or competent when you're facing challenges, the feeling you have maybe on a Sunday night and a Monday morning can tell you a lot about how you feel in your career and just how unlocked it is. Our well-being, our fulfillment, our impact and beyond, in other words, it's another space for us to become our best selves for ourselves firstly, and then bringing that best self to work and everything else. So some of the reasons why it's worthwhile unlocking your career is just for the mores and the greaters. That's what I'm going to call them, right? Greater impact. Some people want to change the world with their careers, right? You want to do work that matters. You might also want more money, right? And again, what I said before is that more money isn't just for the sake of it. Greater impact isn't just for the sake of it. There's an element of fulfillment. There's an element of you being able to take that impact, that energy, that confidence, that resource, which is what money is, and sow it into causes that are dear to your heart, using it to support your community, your family, right? We never just want the thing for the thing's sake. It usually has a ripple effect. And it usually has a ripple effect if it's not there as well. Learning and growing, right? So just looking in the chat at some of the words, we've got unclear, we've got stalled, right? There's elements of stagnation, feeling a little bit stuck in the treacle. And that can come if you aren't learning and growing in your career. The other thing as well is more ease. When you unlock your career, it becomes easier for you to navigate it. It feels like something that fits rather than something that doesn't, something that is difficult unnecessarily, right? And this is not me talking about hard work. This is me talking about, do you fit your career? Does it fit you? Right? Is there a reciprocal sort of relationship with the role that you do and your traits between the organization's values and your values, the industry's way of working and your way of working? Unlocking your career can be a route to really answering those questions. And again, last but not least, greater fulfillment, right? That feeling that I described. Do you feel fulfilled at the end of a Friday? Or do you only feel fulfilled when you're outside of your career, right? And you're not thinking about it at all? If so, we're going to ask some questions. We want to get under the hood of that. So, these are some of the reasons why I want you to consider unlocking your career. And I want to take this moment to check in with you again. And I'd love to invite you to use the chat to do this and share a word that describes what you would like your career to feel like. If you could unlock your career, how would you describe it? And again, we're going to keep it simple, just one word. What's the first word that comes to your mind? Maybe it's something that's on this slide. Do you want ease? Do you want more money? Do you want to do work that lights you up? What are those things? So add those in the chat and just be sure that it's set to everyone so we can all really support each other in what we want it to be, what we see for our unlocked careers in the future. So this is amazing. We're seeing passion, meaningful. This is great. This is amazing. Please keep those words coming because we're going to use them to anchor us throughout this session. And what I'm going to do next in our next section of our time today is actually go through some of the things that you can think about or do when it comes to unlocking your career. And as we go through all of these, I want you to give yourself a score out of 5. And the score is just related to how's it going. And this is a score you can keep to yourself or choose to share it at the end of the exercises. But I'm going to go through 3 main things that you should keep in mind. So at the end, you will have a score out of 15, essentially, right? And I want you to be honest with yourself because like I said, you write it down. I can't see what's on your pen or paper, right? I can't see what's on your Post-it. I can't see what you're thinking. So be honest about where that is at for you, and we'll use that score, but also that insight to then create an action plan for going further when we get into the Q&A. So I'm loving the words that we've got in there as well. And we've got several words. People are giving me bonus words. I love this. More money, creative, learning, 100%. This is what an unlocked career can feel like and look like. The other thing that I want to say before I dive into the first step, right? There's 3 steps. We do have the Q&A open in Zoom, and we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A at the end, but I don't want to burden you with having to hold on to your questions until that point. So please feel free, if you scroll to the bottom bar, there is the Q&A icon with the 2 sort of comment bubbles. I want you to submit your questions in there as we're going along. So by the time I finish going through these 3 steps, we know where we're kicking off for the Q&A. And you might also be able to upvote or sort of thumbs up each other's questions as well, because who knows, you might not be the only person with that question or that thought. So that's another thing before I dive in, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. And again, take what you need. So the first step to unlocking your career is becoming the expert on you. And this looks like really understanding your strengths and your talents. Now, strengths, these are things that you can find out through online quizzes. You can look at a list of strengths, right? And you can understand what those are. What are the things that you are great at, not just good at, right? What are the things that come easy to you that may be difficult for other folks? And then I've also put the word talent there as well, because I almost feel like we get to adulthood and we forget that we're allowed to be talented. And when we think about talents, they're skills that we have, just like strengths, or competencies that we have, just like strengths, right? The difference is they feel a sense of ease. And this can be a difficult thing to navigate because sometimes, depending on how comfortable you are with that fact and that reality that you are great at this, you are amazing, you are gifted in this area, it can make you second guess how hard you're working. Okay. And we'll touch on that a little bit more in imposter syndrome, but think about the things that really come so easy to you that you're almost ashamed to explain how easy they are. People compliment you on them, and you kind of go, yeah, I prepped for it. You didn't prep. You just did it because you're talented in it. I want you to be comfortable in that. But understand what those are specifically. The next thing is to look at your experience and impact. So we spoke about impact in terms of doing work that matters, but what is the difference that you bring to your team? What is the difference that you bring to the department? What is the difference that you bring to the organization? We often only think of experience and impact when it's time for us to look for a new role, right? And we're updating our CV or a covering letter or a LinkedIn or whatever it may be. And we're sitting down there going, what did I do the last 6 months, the last year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? Right? And we're listing out experiences. But I want you to think about this more regularly, because this is, again, another space where you can become the expert on you, because it's through understanding your experiences and your impact that you can identify your expertise, right? The things that you're uniquely positioned to do really, really well, and that you've got evidence to back that up. Or even in terms of the application of your skills, what experiences do you have in doing that? So some of you are really gifted and talented in the area of management and leadership, right? And you've identified that. You've been able to apply those strengths through being a manager for X years, X months, right? What's the impact of that? How have your staff grown? How's the team grown? What results have you gotten, right? And this is me tying it all together as you painting a picture of you. The next thing is your values. So I touched on this really briefly, but ultimately, our organizations have values, but so do we. And if you consciously think about it, it can be another space where you unlock your career. Values can quite often be a space where you realize that you're not in a place that is serving you. Okay. And whether that's an organization, an industry, or a role, your values can almost be a bit of a true north, a bit of a compass to the things that light you up. Okay. And the things that really give you that fulfillment that we spoke about earlier. So what are those values? For me, I value candor, right? I value people being straightforward, right? I value teamwork. These are things that I value. I look for these in every environment that I'm in, whether it's clients that I work with, or whether that is within my actual day role, the company that I work for. It was important for me to know that they value the power of team. One of my values is creativity and innovation, right? I love coming up with ideas. I've left jobs when I couldn't bring my ideas to life, or my ideas got squashed, or even, I guess, labeled as a bad thing, right? Realizing that that was one of my values and that that wasn't going to be honored in that particular environment made me realize that it was time for me to look elsewhere for an environment that did do that, right? Or a different department that did do that. These are really important things to consider. And then the last thing, but definitely not the least, is your mind and your mindset. Two separate things. But I'm talking to you at a time where many folks are experiencing burnout. Over the past year, and even beyond that, many folks have experienced anxiety, depression, right? It's really important that we are minding our mind and understanding what our mental well-being looks like, what our mental health looks like, and understanding how this is impacting our career and vice versa, right? Is your career pushing you to the point of burnout? These are questions I want you to reflect on, because this will then impact the environments that you thrive in, right? This will impact areas where you are looking for somewhere that is inclusive, okay, of your mind, of your mental health journey, of the space that you can create, even down to how you set your weekly routine. I've recently been doing some learning on how to make my business more ADHD friendly, and understanding what that could look like for my colleagues who have ADHD. How do we communicate in the organization, right? How do we get our quote unquote work done? And is that setting them up for success just as it is for anyone else who's neurotypical? And then separate to that, mindset. Check in on you, on your mindset. When we talk about mindset, which coaches talk about all the time, so I won't spend forever here, but we like to look at the growth mindset and the fixed mindset, which were introduced to us by Dr. Carol Dweck. And the idea is that there are two different mindsets that exist on a spectrum. When you think about your career, is it with the fixed mindset? Because the fixed mindset believes that your lot in life is your lot in life. That's it. If you're not good at it today, you're not going to be good at it tomorrow. So why bother trying? Your strengths and talents, your experience and impact, it is what it is. You've got to work with what you have, right? And in some senses, the fixed mindset can feel quite limiting. And what I want to caveat when I'm sharing these definitions for mindset is that you could have a different mindset for a different circumstance. You might have a growth mindset with your career on a whole, but with a particular project or a particular client, it might be a little bit fixed. That's okay. It's perfectly natural. So we have the fixed mindset there where what I have is what I have. There's nothing that I can do about it. You know, you're either talented or you're not. You're either gifted or you're not. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have the growth mindset. And that believes that through effort and applying ourselves, that we can change things. We can grow, we can learn, and we can unlearn, right? And this is the mindset that you all embrace when you shared those words in the chat of what you would want your career to look like. What would you want to unlock your career and find, right? So it's important, check in on that. How are you feeling about your career? What do you believe is capable or possible for you in your career? So these are the things that I want you to think about in terms of step one. And I want to take a moment and ask you to give yourself a score out of 5. And again, where 1 is it's not, how's it going? Not very well, right? I don't feel like I'm the expert on me at all. Whereas 5 is I am extremely confident, right? It's going great. It's going really well. I'm really great at being the expert on me. Okay, so 1 to 5. And of course, there is a 3 if you're in the middle. But again, reflect on what I just shared and give yourself a score. And of course, as we're going through, just having a look to see if anyone has submitted any questions, because those are all welcome. Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing in the chat. Please feel free to do so if you feel comfortable. So amazing, feeling clear on who you are and what you possess. But sometimes maybe the natural gifts or talents are not very concrete, especially in relation to career going forward. Totally understand that. Totally understand that. Sometimes what's helpful in this is also asking a friend, ask maybe a colleague or somebody who's worked with you when they've seen you just excel without what seems to be much effort. That can be a little bit of a clue or just food for thought. All right, let's go on to the second one. So the second thing is to communicate confidently. Please do not be this brilliant person that is the biggest secret known to man, right? Or woman, indeed. It's so important to communicate confidently and build a bold personal brand. And when I say bold personal brand, I don't mean that you have a personal brand that, the principle of it is boldness. No, I mean is you need to be bold and build a personal brand. Deciding to do that intentionally is a bold move. It is deciding to put your head above the rest and raise your hand when others may not be doing that around you. But it's really, really important to be intentional and double down on what you want to be known for. Your personal brand is how you communicate everything that we just reflected on. It's how you communicate your impact, your experience, your expertise, your values, your interests, right? Your mindset, your beliefs. This is how you share it with the world. Because if you don't share it, they won't know, right? They won't know. Many of the mistakes that I see my clients make is around assuming that folks see their value without them ever articulating it. My manager should have known that I'm perfect for that role. Okay. How? How would they have known that not even perfect for the role? How would they have even known that you were interested in the first place, much less perfect for it? What are you doing today to communicate that? And that kind of brings me on to word association, right? It's a game. But I want to challenge you to think of what comes to mind when people think of you. Do you know what comes to mind when people think of you? How do people describe you in rooms where you're not there? And again, this is an area where you can just ask people, when you think of me, what do you think of? When you think of how I work, what comes to mind? Understand what that is, because that will help you understand how you've been communicating so far. And you may not like what they say, or you may be pleasantly surprised. But either way, you having that knowledge allows you to then go whoop, right back and be even more intentional with your personal brand. The next thing is going back to what I mentioned before. You're great, not good. Right? We can all fill a profile, a CV, or an application with all the things that we're good at, but what do you stand out? Like, where are you just one step in front of the rest? What are those things? And be specific with yourself. If you're taking notes right now, be specific with the things that you are absolutely amazing at. Right? And ask yourself, are those things a secret, or do others know what those are? All right. Have you spent enough time to explore your talents to then be able to articulate it to others? That is the reality of it. And sometimes this can be as easy as, again, like we did before. Think about all the tasks that you do within your career, within your role, within your business. How does it feel to you? Right? What kind of results do you get from it versus effort? Right? This reminds me of going back to early years education. And I remember I used to get a two-part grade, one for effort and one for achievement. Are you getting a 5 in achievement and your effort is at a 2? It's not something to be ashamed of. That can often be a sign that that's something that you are just great at. It's important to understand these things about yourself. So these are the 3 things around communicating confidently. Once you know what you to communicate, it becomes easier to take those opportunities and do that. It becomes so much easier to see those spaces where you are performing in a different way. You have a different and unique approach. Your results are unique. Your results are different. But this is really, really important. So again, going to pause to ask you to give yourself a score out of 5. So where you're not communicating at all, that's a 1. And if you're doing this extremely well, that's a 5. And give yourself a 3 if it's kind of like neither nor. Sometimes when I feel like it, depends on who I'm talking to, right? If it's a little bit seasonal, right? If it's a little bit seasonal. And of course, in the chat, you can share your scores, and in the Q&A, you can ask any questions that are coming up for you. We have one more step, and then we'll be able to go into how do you put these things into practice and into action. Okay. So the third and final thing, and this is the bit that that's fine. The main thing is that you know how you to get in your own way. I procrastinate time to time. I turn small tasks and I make them overwhelmingly big. Those two I know that I get in my own way when it comes to taking action, when it comes to creating results, when it comes to goals. So these are things to be really candid about. And all of that starts off with setting a goal, set a pathway, set a vision, set something that you want, and don't be afraid to own that you want it. Don't be afraid of your own ambition. Don't be afraid of believing that you deserve and can indeed achieve more or grow. So taking the time to set goals is an important part of this. The next important part of this is something I touched on: productivity versus procrastination. Do you know when you are your most productive? What does that look like? What kind of environment? What criteria is needed for that? And I want to encourage you to go beyond, oh, I'm a morning person, I'm an afternoon person, I'm an evening, but what are the conditions for you being able to show up and do your best work? Right? What are those specific things? I want you to write those down. Go back through those experiences of when you were your most productive and when you were your most unproductive and your most distracted, right? If you're like me and you struggle with procrastination, are there a particular type of task you procrastinate on? All right. Where are you getting stuck in the treacle? Be very clear about that, because these are things that will get in the way. Just like the next thing, imposter syndrome. If you experience it, big if, not everybody experiences it. I'm not here to label people, but that can also be something that gets in the way of you taking relentless action. So it's important for you to, again, with both of the productivity and procrastination things, understand where imposter syndrome arises, what circumstance, what environment. What's the magical recipe for imposter syndrome to rock up in your career? And face that head on. There are 5 personas when it comes to imposter syndrome. And this is something that I explore in some other workshops. And I have a podcast episode on it. You can Google it and go through it all. Understand the personas, because it will give you a lot of insight into how it shows up for you and the tools that you can use to combat it and to move through it, so it doesn't become something that gets in the way of you taking action. And then last but not least, reflection and review. It's so easy, especially if you identify as an ambitious person, as a driven person, right? You're always moving forward. You know what you're going for at any given time, right? It's so easy to just keep on going on to the next. Ensure you're taking that time to reflect and review what went well and what didn't. What did you learn? And also separately, what did you learn about yourself? Because this is the only way to fold it back into you being the expert on you. This is the way that you are able to iterate on what works, because you've taken the time to notice it, right? And challenge and experiment what didn't work so well, so that you create your own playbook, you create your own methodologies for getting certain things done or making certain changes or decisions. You start to condense that knowledge and then feed it back into becoming something that you communicate, feed it back into something that is you exemplifying your values. These 3 steps ultimately become a loop that you're continuously doing throughout your career. And in the middle of that loop is whatever your goal is. If your goal here today is to change careers, great, apply this. If your goal here today is to get a promotion, apply this. If your goal here today is just to simply feel more confident in your role, apply these things. The principles are still going to be the same. So I'd love for you to take a moment and give yourself a score out of 5 for this step. And like I said, by now you should have a score out of 15. So if you feel comfortable sharing your individual score for this step, or indeed your total score out of 15, I want to encourage you to do so in the chat. And of course, in the Q&A, place any questions that are coming up for you. Amazing. So just looking in the chat and we've got some scores, which is great. Perfect. So now you have that score, I want to challenge you, right? This score does not define you. It's simply a snapshot, right? It's a snapshot. And to be honest, if somebody wasn't on this session, they wouldn't understand what that number means in the first place. What's more important is what that means to you. Okay. What were the differences between you scoring 5 out of 5 for everything? What thoughts came to mind? And as you think of that thought, I want you to note one thing that you're going to explore from this session. So going onwards from today, what is one thing from those 3 steps that you're going to work on, investigate, try out, check out? And again, I want you to note it down for yourself, but please also feel free to share it in the chat. And of course, if you don't feel quite ready to note one thing, maybe share a reflection. What were your thoughts as we were moving through the 3 steps? Amazing. So we've got some comments in the chat. Hone in on my natural gifts and talents, where I feel confident that I'm great at these things. Understanding when imposter syndrome comes up and when I am the most productive. These are amazing. And again, this isn't wave your magic wand and everything happens overnight. It is simply by you choosing the one thing at a time to focus on that you're able to slowly but surely unlock your career and get it to where you want it to be. This is amazing. Great. So look at my personal branding and communicating my value. Yes. So, so important. And being intentional with these things. It's so important to be intentional. Some of this you may have in place simply by virtue of, you know, things that you always do naturally. I've always been a goal setter. So there may have been many things that I've said today that you go, yeah, always done that. Always done that. There's always going to be something new that you can experiment with. You are your own career scientist. So what's your next experiment going to be? Big question. So now, as promised, we have plenty of time for Q&A, where we can dive a little bit deeper into what it means to unlock your particular career. I want to encourage you to be as specific and as detailed as you like with your questions, and I will go through them in order of submission. So the first question that we have here is, how did you figure out what you are great at, not just good at? So this is an amazing question because it feels like a very unnatural question. But ultimately, and when I say unnatural question, I mean me challenging you to think about what you're great at and not good at. But ultimately, it's about having that sense of ease, right? It's about how does it feel for you, and are your results disproportionate to the effort that you put in for something? Is it something that you excel at, right? And you'll have answers to that yourself, but also this is a space where you can quote unquote phone a friend. Reach out to 5 people in your life from all different walks of life. So it could be family members, it could be your partner, it could be current colleague and an ex-colleague, current manager and a previous manager. You could ask them, what do you think that I am great at? Okay, where have you seen me excel and what was I doing? Because if you look at that and if you bring those together with what's coming up for you naturally, you might find some common threads. So I know that I am great, not good at public speaking. That's not me being arrogant. That's me knowing that I have always found it really easy. This doesn't mean that I don't work hard at it, but it's something that if I'm in a room of my peers, I can often do better or more effectively than others. But again, as I just described, I had to go back through my experiences. So that can be one thing as well. Go back through all your work experiences and note down your key achievements or the key skills that you really brought to the table there to create impact. Are there any common threads there as well? That can also give you a sign to see what you're great at. So those are a few things. Hopefully that helps. Thank you for your questions. Let's go to the next one. So the next question is, do the goals have to be SMART? If the SMART framework works for you, then yes. If not, then no. There are over 20 plus different ways of setting goals in this world. All right. The main thing is that the goal is meaningful to you, which of course is included in the SMART goal framework. So this is what I mean when I say if it works for you, it works for you for sure. The biggest game changer when it comes to setting goals is to ask yourself a few questions. And some of the questions are, what do I need? Right? What do I need to be successful in this goal? The next question, what are some of the steps towards this goal? Because again, quite often we can just see the goal for itself in isolation and not realize that there's a little bit of criteria that needs to be checked off before I actually hit it. And that's where a lot of people like the framework of OKRs, which is objectives and key results. And the objective is essentially the goal and the key results are the parts of it. So if I had an OKR of getting a new job, some of the key results would be deciding what roles I'm applying for. Another key result would be sorting out my CV and covering letter. Another key result could be applying for 15 jobs. That goal setting framework is designed so that ultimately, once you check off the key results, which are focused on the action as opposed to the outcome, you should then be led to the outcome ultimately. So my answer on this is it's always up to you. This is another place for reflection and review. If you set your 90-day goals with the SMART framework, see how that goes. Layer, don't be afraid to layer in other goal frameworks as well. There's a really powerful coaching exercise when you set goals. So for some of you, you want more money, more creativity, right? All of these things are amazing. And it's important for you to spend a little time around what is called the be, do, have exercise. And this is something I do with clients. Who do I need to be to achieve this goal? Right? That might look like patience. That might look like resilience. That might need to look like more confidence, right? Who do I need to be? Who do I need to become? Which version of Jazz gets that goal and, achieves it? The next thing is do. And this again can often spring a little to-do list. What do I need to do to reach this? So again, using the example of finding a new role, need to update my CV, probably need to network, probably need to update my LinkedIn profile, probably need to apply for at least 20 jobs. Okay. Right? So be and do. And then the last thing is have. It's probably going to sound like a pretty basic one, but like I probably need to have internet connection. I need to have time in my calendar, set time to do it. I might need to have support from a recruiter or a career coach. What are the moving pieces around that goal that will make it more successful? And then, of course, like I said, I'm a coach. Always ask yourself, what would get in the way of me achieving this? What could get in my way? And like I said, it could be you. Let's be honest. My procrastination has kept me from many a goal. But if you plan for that up front, you can then create a game plan for moving around it. Right? Okay, procrastination gets in the around. Maybe have an accountability buddy. Maybe set reminders. Maybe remind myself why I care about this goal. These are some really powerful questions to ask yourself, regardless of which goal setting framework you use. Next question. If you're looking to change your type of role, how do you counteract what you don't experience? This is a question that keeps people back from exploring careers and unlocking careers simply. So when you look at experience, it's really, really important some kind of life experience, right? And that life experience can still be evidence of you having certain competencies and skills, certain transferable competencies and skills. So it's really, really important for you to remember that and put that at the forefront of you looking for these opportunities. The other thing is not having an experience. I told them, and right up front, I was like, these are the experiences that I have. Oh no, we're having struggles with connect. Okay, I've just changed my connection. Let me know if that's a little bit better, but I'll keep an eye on the chat if it breaks up again. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to start from the top for this question. Amazing, we're back connected. So the question is, if you're looking to change your type of role, how do you counteract the barrier that you don't have the experience? Amazing, everybody can hear me again. So the first thing is to separate role specific experience from experience in general. To be in this room, you have a ton of experience. And those experiences, even though they're not role specific, can still be provided as evidence that you have the skills and the competency to do this role. The other thing is around the lack of experience being a barrier. I want to challenge you with your mindset there to go, is that a belief that you hold, or has the opportunity specifically said you need to have these experiences to apply? Because sometimes if we go back to it, we realize that the things that we think we have to have are just in the nice to have section of the job description. So check in on that. And that's not me saying that there won't be roles that categorically want a specific experience. That's fine. That's just not the role for you. There'll be others. But I really want you to challenge, is this a barrier, or do I believe it will be a barrier? And is that holding you back? I'm somebody who moved from hospitality to property and then property to tech. In each of those opportunities, I lent on that confident communication and put my experiences front and center. I let them know, yes, I don't have this, and I'm so excited to learn that. This is what I could also bring that you don't seem to have already, right? Or you might not have. I put my best foot forward in a very transparent way, but I also let them know that I have what it takes to learn what needs to be learned. So that can be a really helpful way. Go back through your experiences, and I do this on an A3 piece of paper. Write out all the experiences that you've had. So whether that's work experience, whether that's in education, whether that's in community efforts, heck, whether that's in your family, right? Write those down, and against it, note down the skills and the competencies that were required or displayed in those. I'm the oldest of 4 children. I could wax lyrical about being the oldest, making me more organized, more responsible, more creative, right? All of these words, look at those words, and those are the things that you can then bring into that role. Those are the skills, those are the talents that, regardless of the environment or the role specific experience, you can bring to prove that you have what it takes. So hopefully that helps. And again, depending on the niche of the market, you can also then go and find other ways of getting experience. I know for me, when I started out in hospitality, I had a feeling I wanted to be an events manager. And what I did was I networked. I networked around what the role was so that I could be the person in the interview going, I've never been an events manager, but I understand many of the challenges. I have many friends who do the role and they've shared certain things with me. And I believe that I'm able to do this because of these reasons. I have that understanding instead. Okay. My experience is that managers often struggle with the concept of people who don't have the experience, as it will create more work for them. You bring different positives, but it will be more work for the manager in the short term. 100% understand that. And thank you so much for adding that extra context. In those cases, your job is just to make it an easier yes for them. Detail what you would need to be successful in the role. I don't have experience in this, but if I were to shadow somebody for a few weeks, I could pick it up. If I were able to do this program, then I would be able to pick it up. If I were able to be mentored by somebody in the role, then I would be confident that I could do it within the first 6 weeks. Or in fact, I've asked somebody in the team, or how long would you expect somebody to ramp up in this role? Right? Asking that as a question at the interview stage or the consideration stage. Speak directly to that concern. Don't be afraid to do that, right? I know that you're concerned that I don't have the experience, but I do have the passion and I'm dedicated. You know, what I would want from you is to understand your expectations on when you'd want me to be fully confident in doing the role without shadowing or without support. Ask that question and put the ball in their court. Then at least you know how open they are to it, or if they're not open at all. Because the reality of it as well is that quite often there's an element of organizations, and again, it depends on the organization, but there's organizations and managers that will already know that regardless of whether you have role specific experience, they're still going to need to do a level of training because you may know how to do it one way where they do it a completely different way. So you also want to understand if you're speaking with a manager that expects to do no onboarding. If that's the case, then I'd question whether that's the role for you anyway. And maybe that's the question that you ask them again. What does onboarding like for anybody who joins this team? Okay, great. I'd be fine with that. I'd be able to learn within 3 weeks. Understand what that is so then you can be specific and say, because I don't have the role specific experience here, that induction sounds really great, that onboarding sounds really great. I would probably just need to have my buddy or my onboarding mentor be somebody who's doing the role, so then while they are teaching me the ropes, I'm also able to spend time learning from them directly. You've answered the question. The manager doesn't have to do anything. The manager just needs to give you somebody. And again, look at that response, understand what they say in response to see if any further concerns come up, or whether, again, you've been able to tackle their concerns head on and actually convince them to give you a chance. Yeah. Thank you so much for that question. Does anybody have any other questions? Just having a look in the chat. Yep, hit the ground running. Hit the ground running doesn't mean that their organizations can skip over having an onboarding. It's important for anybody who wants to be successful in the role. Doesn't mean that it might not be fast paced, right? The company that I work for, we all described our onboarding like drinking from a fire hose. We still had an onboarding. It was still a little bit intense, but at least we were given the onboarding in the first instance. That was a non-negotiable for everybody joining the organization. Okay. Got another great question. So I've been to many events where they say you must look for a good manager. It's difficult to see that in an interview. How would you work that out? Oh, okay. So this is this is a tough one. Um, this will be about the questions that you ask at interview stage. Asking them what their management style is, or their leadership style, or communication style is. And this is not about looking for them to say fancy words, but hearing them talk specifically about how they work with their team. How do you motivate your team? Right? Those are questions that we ask to understand if we have a good manager. But I want us to think about what we mean by good. Because for me, there are managers that are quote unquote good managers that are a bad fit for me. And this goes back to the values. So there'll be values for the organization, but what are your values? So for me, I value creativity and innovation. So I'll be asking a question to say, you know, as a team, do we get many opportunities to create new processes? And I will then want to know what their response is. Is it, no, we have a pretty set procedure for everything? Or is it, yeah, we're always looking for ways to collaborate and make things better? Can they even give you an example of that? Because then that's letting me know I'm working with a manager who is comfortable with a team that is creative and has ideas for doing things better versus a manager who is more comfortable with structure and a very, very set procedure. Now, for some folks in the room, structure and procedure is just what the doctor ordered. Right? I've been in organizations where there's just a little bit too much innovation, right? There seems to be zero processes. But if you know yourself, you'll know whether that works for you. And also in the answering of the question, you can add another question to identify whether that's just their style or is that how the whole organization works? Do you have the rebel manager that's creative and the company's pretty structured? Or is that how everyone works? Because again, that's a way of you understanding in this environment, because we all know your manager can change. Your manager can change overnight, right? Is it a good fit for me as opposed to good manager? Because we'll define that in completely different ways. Awesome. Do we have any more questions? Any questions at all? If not, that's absolutely fine. We have recorded the session today, so you can come back to it. My details are on the screen. So if anything comes up following the session, pop me an email. You know, these are the things that I love talking about and supporting folks with. I have a number of other workshops. I should hopefully do another one with We Are the City soon. So would love to hear from you with what you want support with. And of course, connect with me on Instagram or LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I'm Jaz Broughton. And on Instagram, I am justjaz.co, as I'd love to connect with you also. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Jaz, and thank you so much to everyone for joining. Have a lovely rest of the day, guys.